Good evening. Welcome to another one of our bookshop events. It's been a long time since we've done a virtual. I suspect Simon will admit to having done lots of this sort of thing, a man in his position. But actually, with the world kind of opening up, we've done so many in-person ones, though. So it's quite refreshing to be back in my sitting room and doing actually, given the rain we've all had, I don't know if you've had the same rain where you are, but so welcome everyone wherever you are in the UK, and thank you very much, Simon, for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Ben.
No, and joining us as well is Emily Stone. Now, this is our first ever book club meeting, and so a book club event, and it was Emily's idea. Emily works for Gilded Bee here in Tring. So, Emily, thank you so much for assisting with getting this going.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Ben. The backstory to this particular one was that we've been thinking about running a business book club for quite some time, and actually Simon posted, what was the catalyst to this happening was that Simon posted on a group called Delegate Wranglers that I'm also a member of, about his new book. And it was just that kind of moment, you know, when something happens, you go, right, that's the book that we need to start with. It really resonated with me personally, as well as I thought it would resonate with a lot of our clients, and it complemented a lot of our hampers. So that's what made us kind of really push forward and get this thing started. And thankfully, Simon, you've been amazing, and you jumped at the opportunity through your energy, obviously.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I'm going to leave Emily and Simon to have a chat for the next half an hour. Audience, I'm going to sort of badger you for a load of questions, which I'd like you to put in the Q&A function, which I've got set up and open. So without further ado, let me leave you in the brilliant hands of Emily and Simon.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ben. Thank you. Just before we got started, I also wanted to give a bit more background on why we wanted to do a business book club. We're Gilded Bee. We're a corporate gifting company, and we provide really thoughtful and meaningful gifts. And a lot of our hampers have books at the heart of them. We find that books make an incredible gift, and they help to get across key messages and to support people in their journeys. So we've sent out lots of gifts in the past with books such as Atomic Habits from James Clear, all about making those tiny, small changes to achieve great results. We've got our great British hamper that has the micro-adventure book at the centre, which is all about enjoying your kind of life outside of your 9 to 5 and getting out and about in the great British outdoors. So as I mentioned before, I saw Simon post about his book, and it only came out in April, I want to say, the end of April, Simon?
Yeah, 21st of April.
Yeah, 21st of April. And you posted probably a few weeks before then. And immediately the topic really resonated with me. I'm guilty. People have said that I have high energy levels, but I also have, they drop. And I know that, that's something that I've really struggled with, is keeping that consistency and striving forward and achieving the goals that I want to achieve. So this was a topic which was really close to my heart. And I also felt that reading a little bit about it and it would be something that a lot of people would benefit from as well. So I thought a good starting point, if it's okay with you, because there's going to be a mix of people on this session who will have read the book. Some may have only read a few pages, some may not have read any, or some may have read the whole book. Could you give us a little bit more of a background on the book and why you decided to write it?
Yeah, sure. So just before the world went into lockdown in early 2020, I was in conversations with Penguin, and I remember getting asked, Emily, Simon, what would you write about if we were to work together and you were to write a book with us? And there were a number of ideas that I came up with, but the one that I put top of the list was the working title, Energy is Everything. Now, of course, you know that title has evolved and it's now become Energize, that you see on the front cover of that book, but it started with Energy is Everything. And the reason I wanted to write from that perspective is because it spoke a lot to my own journey. Mm-hmm. I began my career in the financial services industry at what was probably the worst possible time, a year before the financial crisis of 2008. And so I ended up being in and out of jobs within the industry for nearly 10 years before transitioning into the path of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Now, during those years in finance, as many people know who have friends or who work in finance, is the hours can be long and punishing. And it can be very stressful in terms of the work and the deadlines and the pressure that gets put on you. And so I experienced moments in which I just had zero energy. Now, when I talk about zero energy, I mean from a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual perspective. Spiritual because I had mistakenly grown up with this belief that success was defined by my job title. Be a banker, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an accountant. And so because I had chosen the career path that I was in, more because that was what my family, what my friends, what my colleagues told me was successful, it was really going against what I truly wanted to do. And it kept my strengths, my talents, and my skills dormant. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, because it spoke to that experience of having zero energy to today, in which I'm waking up full of energy, excited by possibilities over limitations, excited about resourcefulness over lack of resources. And also because when I started to study some of the most successful leaders, teams, and individuals, what I noticed was that they weren't necessarily the smartest, the strongest, or the fastest, but they were the best when it came to managing their energy. Because they knew to succeed, we have to be in for the long term. And you cannot thrive in the long term if you simply don't have the energy to show up each day.
Fantastic. So what made you make that shift? What made you actually make that big change, that ultimately what pushed you to go into this more entrepreneurial world and get out of the restrictions of job titles? Because I think a lot of people probably on this call, I've been guilty of that as well, but I used to feel like you had to go up these steps and that was how you became successful, when actually the possibilities are endless. But what made you do that and actually take action and get out of that environment?
I think there were a number of factors, no one in sort of particular, but these sort of things came together very quickly. So first is I started looking at people 30, 40 years my senior, and I didn't like where they were. I couldn't see myself being in this same position all those decades down the line. And it started to act as a wake-up call for me. It started to get me to question, what did success mean to me? And so I sat down and I started reflecting on a couple of questions, three of which I mentioned in chapter 3 of the book. First question was, what did success mean to me? The second was, what did fulfillment look like to me? And the third was, what sort of impact did I want to have in the world? Now, the reason why these questions are important is because what I noticed, and what I still notice today, is many of us are exhausted, not because we are doing too much, but often because we're doing too little of the things that bring us joy, and also because we're running someone else's race. Now, when we understand what success means to us, and we have clarity as to what it is we want to achieve, our challenge then becomes building our life and our career around those answers. And I think that the moment we start doing that is when we get excited and energized to see what is possible. And for me, that's what happened. I transitioned from this place of being interested. And I think a lot of people are still on this interest stage. You know, we begin the new year with New Year's resolutions, but in fact, they're not really resolutions. They're a list of interests. I'm interested to work out more regularly. I'm interested to change my career path. I'm interested to finally start that project, that idea, that business. But yet, if we actually followed through, we wouldn't be making the same resolutions again and again and again. But that is the reality for so many. We make the same resolutions the next year and the next year and the next year, because all we've done is we've compiled a mountain of interests. So for me, the catalyst was moving away from that place of interest to a place of commitment. Telling myself, I am committed to make this happen. I am committed to see this through, to explore what is possible on the entrepreneurial path. The reason that transition or that bridge to the land of commitment is important is because the moment we are in that space, our mind moves into the how. How are we going to do it? How are we going to take that first step? How am I going to learn what is required? And that is a beautiful space, because that is you now in an action-oriented mindset. You're thinking about the next step, and that's how things start to happen. So that's for me where the shift started to really begin, Emily, is this jump from interest to commitment, combined with the fact that I saw these senior people in my companies that I was working with, and I just didn't want to be in that position when I was their age.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I have to say that point about the interested to commitment, before I'd read the section in the book, you posted something on social media about it, and I immediately flicked forward and read the section. And oh my God, it resonated so much, because again, that's something that I can see in myself. And it's something I read in Atomic Habits, something similar. He was talking about how a lot of people rephrasing it as well. Like they say, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to stop smoking, rather than saying, I do not smoke. I am a healthy person, even in that sense. And it really resonated with me. And I thought of examples in my own life where I've done it. And there's lots of things I'd like to do. I think I'm in the interested category in quite a lot. But the two areas that I've managed to commit to one was turning vegan. And it was just, and what I'd love to do is bottle that up. If you could tell me how I could get to that commitment and everything, then I think you have the answer you could unlock so much, because in that, a lot of things all came together at once. And then one day I just said, I am now vegan. And the next day there was no kind of, I'm going to do it, tomorrow.
I'm curious, Emily, what was it that you feel changed, in the sense that you said you committed to being vegan and one day you're just like, yep, I'm vegan. What was it you think shifted?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just feeling rubbish, and I'd been vegetarian for a while. And then I basically watched Game Changers, and that just pushed me. It made so much sense to me as a show. It just pushed me over the edge. And then I just committed to it fully. That was the big difference. There was never a point when I was trying to be, or I'm going to reduce down. I just committed. And yeah, I feel like that is, if you could do that in everything.
But it's interesting because you said twice, I don't know if you noticed, Emily, but I think I just want to raise this for the audience.
No,
you said twice, I just said, I am vegan. And it's interesting because once we say I am something, and this is where we touch on the idea of identity. Once we say I am something, what happens is that our choices and behaviors become easier to make. It's like, for me, when I talk about the transition from interest to commitment, once I was committed, I was telling myself, I am an entrepreneur. I am the CEO of my business. Now, what happens is, once you embrace that identity that comes with I am whatever, fill in the gap, what happens is that you start seeing things from that perspective. So when you go to the supermarket now, you're coming from a place of I am vegan. When I go about thinking, what am I going to do for my day? I'm coming from a place of I am an entrepreneur, I am a CEO. So even though I was still in a full-time job and I felt like Superman, but without the superpowers, going into work with a white shirt, a suit and a tie, and then rushing into the toilet cubicles to change into my black t-shirt and jeans to go out and network and go to events. I was driven by the identity of what I wanted to be. And I was living that as if I was already that identity in the now. And so the choices became a lot easier. And so it's interesting when you said, I am vegan. I just woke up on this, I'm vegan. And I think that is a powerful shift, because that is your mind committed now. When you say, I am something, that's a acknowledgement that your identity has now shifted. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really, I think it's amazing. One of the other things that really stood out for me as well, and it was another one of those moments, was again, it's something that touches on some other books I've read, and that's all about improving, not comparing yourself to others, and always making, you've got that vision and that path, and always making in continual improving, so being better than yesterday. And you ask a question, I think it's on page 130, you ask a question about, in 5 years' time, if you carried on doing what you're doing now, where would you be? Would you be further forward or behind? And that, again, was one of those moments in the book when I just read it and thought, my goodness, like, I think it's multidimensional. Like, there's certain aspects, obviously, you would be further forward. I'd love to know more sort of context. I mean, in your own experience, and you see that, how you track and with the clients that you work with, because that was a really big point, I think, for me in the book when I read that section. Definitely. And I think the context behind asking that question is, one, from personal experience, but also what I've seen with my clients. And it stems from the fact that often when we think about good habits, or we think about the things that we need to do in order to achieve a certain goal or vision, what we do is we often tell ourselves, well, I'm going to enjoy the bad habit today because the future me will make up for that. So the me next year, the me when I'm at my next birthday, the me once I get promoted, the me when I make that certain number of money, will start embracing those good habits. But the reality is you don't, because your future is actually dictated by what you do in the present. And so even though we say, okay, the me next week would do it, well, you're never going to get to the me next week embracing the good habits unless something shifts today in the present.
Yeah.
And so you're putting too much pressure on the future version of you, when actually it is the present version of you that determines who you are tomorrow. And so with that question, I wanted to deepen people's awareness about what is happening in their lives today. Because, you know, this is a popular saying in self-development that it's not what you do once in a while that really makes a difference, but it's what you do every day. And that's why in the book, I talk about this concept of consistency. Now, of course, you can't show up the same way with the same energy every day. We are human. The thing is, as long as you show up in some small way each and every day, what happens is that you're tapping into the power of consistency. And actually, that's how you achieve your growth, your development, and your success. You know, there's a quote that I shared, which I think speaks very well to this, Emily. And it was when Denzel Washington received his award for his performance in the film Fences. And he said to the audience on acceptance of his award, he said, without commitment, you will never begin. But more importantly, without consistency, you will never finish. And so by asking ourselves that question, we hold some truth in front of our face. We say, well, if I take what is going on, not potentially next month or next year, but right now, if you take your current day and you repeat it every year, every day for the next 5 years, would you be closer to or further away? That is your truth. Because that is what actually determines your trajectory. And so once we have awareness of whether that's contributing or drawing us further away, we can start to make changes in the present.
Yeah. Is that something, how often would you check back in with clients on that? Is that, or personally, would you be checking back in on yourself to say, how am I progressing forward? Are you doing that weekly, daily?
Yeah, I always suggest to people, I do mine on a weekly basis. Because at the end of each week, I think it's it's good to review what happened in the past 7 days, but also to plan for the week ahead. Because what happens is that unless we plan, unless we review, life just catches up with us. We just don't find the time to do this. But actually, when we touch base on a regular basis through the activity of writing or journaling, what it allows us to do is it allows us to live in this present feeling of awareness. And you cannot have self-development without self-awareness, because you can't change what you're not aware of. And that is why in chapter 2 of the book, I highlight that the beginning of true wisdom is knowing yourself. And so writing and journaling is an act and a process of knowing yourself at a deeper and more intimate level.
And is that something do you do that personally? You write in a journal, and how much do people, is that something you do like every day again on a?
So I do it on a daily, weekly and quarterly basis in different formats. And what I encourage people to do is, first of all, let go of an idea that there is a right and there is a wrong way. There is no right or wrong way of doing this. There is whatever comes naturally to you. So for some of us, when we journal, when we review each week, we need some prompts. So we might need some prompts to get us thinking. And there's some prompts in the book to help you get going if you've never done this before. For others, it's just a question of downloading whatever's on our mind onto paper. So we have some clarity, we have less sort of weight on our mind. And for others, they find it better doing it as a group of friends. So you kind of meet together and you kind of share and you write down what you're learning from the past week. So there's no right and wrong way. And that's why the beauty in this is just experiment. Try different ways and see what resonates with you.
Oh, interesting. And then you touch on a lot about knowing your purpose and having a vision and being able to see where you're going to, where you're traveling to. And I really liked how you said about test driving your vision at some point in the book, a bit later on in the book, which I thought was great, because again, it was bringing it back to being in the moment rather than it just being this thing that was always really far away, and actually putting it into practice. I wondered, what is, you're clearly a very successful man, and you are on a mission. I can see it on social media and all the different activities that you're doing. What is your personal vision? What is it that where do you see yourself?
It's interesting because as I've become older and wiser, Emily, my vision is something that I have, but I'm not fixed to. So it's a bit of a paradox, and I'll explain a little bit more in a moment. So the vision I have for myself is constantly evolving, as it should for all of us. Because as you take small steps forward, as you yourself evolve, as you grow, as you expand your opportunity horizon, what happens is clearly that vision is going to change and evolve. So at the moment, my vision is to amplify the work that I do internationally. So I'm going on a speaking tour to India. I'm doing a conference in Dubai later this year. That will plug into my vision. So is to take some of my work and explore the media side of it. So I'm currently working on putting a pitch deck together for a show on a streaming service platform like Netflix or Apple or Amazon. And so that's part of the vision. Now, the reason why I say there's a bit of a paradox here is that once we have a vision, it's important to then put it to one side and not be attached to it, which is actually very difficult for a lot of us. And there's a statement that I share in the book that I learned from going to one of these Zen temples in Kyoto, Japan, that said, be attached to no outcome and open to everything. So if we dissect that statement, here's what it means. Be attached to no outcome simply means that, yes, you've got a vision, and that gives you context for what actions you should take in the present moment. But the second part of the statement, be open to everything, means that by not being attached to that vision, you're also open to the fact that your vision may change in ways you would never imagine. To give an example, when I first exited the corporate world and I started on the entrepreneurial path, all I wanted to do was coach. All I wanted to do was coach people. And that was my vision. But at the same time, I wasn't fixated on that being my only vision. I was also open to whatever may happen along the way. And one of my clients happened to work for a big multinational company. And it's a story I share in the latter part of the book about, making momentum your friend. And she asked me during one of those coaching sessions, she said, Simon, the leadership team are looking at holding a series of seminars, and I would love to put your name forward. Now, at that point, I'd never imagined that I would be a speaker. But suddenly I had this opportunity to speak to a company and the leadership team. So being open to everything, I said, yes, why not? I'll give it a try if they're willing to see how I perform, if they're willing to have me as a guest speaker. And suddenly now the path of my vision opened up to speaking being a part of the grand goal. And the same with the book. I never planned to write a book, but with the work that I do, suddenly opportunities started to come. And so being attached to no outcome simply means that you're not hitching your emotional feeling or your well-being to something that in many cases is out of your control. So to give you an example, if your vision is to be promoted to managing director or to be team leader or to get that pay rise, now what happens is if you're too fixated on that vision, then what does that mean you are in the present? Are you living in a state of anxiety? Are you living in a state of frustration or anger? And so what happens when we become too fixated and attached to an outcome is we live as if we're never going to die and then die having never really lived.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I can think of personal situations when that has been the case. I remember doing an activity actually with an old boss who got us to map out where we wanted to go. And I had this it was in my early 20s, I was incredibly ambitious and had this very fixed 8-year plan, which meant when I hit 30, I had to have achieved certain things. And basically I didn't achieve that. And I remember having quite a moment when it was like, oh my goodness, where do you go from here? And it was because of what you've just talked about. It was being too fixated on one thing and less about being open to others. And I guess others might, would you say like some growth, like having a growth mindset? So having that sort of yes mentality to looking at different opportunities.
Definitely. I mean, one of the questions I've been asked quite a lot recently is what has been one of the skills do you feel that has become more important as a result of the COVID pandemic in the last couple of years that maybe we just didn't appreciate before? And the answer I give to that question is the same every time, and that is adaptability. If there's anything we've learned from the COVID pandemic, is the importance of being adaptable. Because if we were not adaptable, then whatever life throws our way, we simply become a victim. We simply become overwhelmed by external circumstance. But if going back to that second part of the statement, if we're open to everything, that means we are embracing a growth mindset. We are embracing the eternal student mindset. And that means we suddenly have this characteristic of adapting to whatever the world throws our way. And that malleability is so important, because it means that we can constantly mold ourselves regardless of what the external circumstance is, good or bad.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that's something obviously that applies to businesses, not just the individuals within them as well. When I think of our industry, we work, and there's quite a few on this session now, or we'll certainly watch it afterwards, who are in the event industry, which obviously COVID completely knocked on its head and created some huge challenges with the fact that physical events couldn't happen. And I've noticed a lot of the agencies that we work with, there's been some incredible examples of ones who've really innovated. They've jumped on the virtual event bandwagon. They've had like full studios and put a lot of investment and time and energy into this whole other string to their bow now as a business. That's really exciting to watch. They've been truly adaptable, like you've just been saying. And now that things are moving back again, they've still got this now new strength within their business, which is now giving them the opportunity to be a hybrid and still stand out in that way as well. And yeah, we see it with what we do all the time. We're having to adapt. We think one thing's going to happen.
And I think one of the one of the helpful ways to being more adaptable is something I share in the chapter called Electrify Your Environment. Is once we have diversity in our environment, what happens is that gives us ideas on how we can adapt. So Emily, you would have seen my book launch. With my network, I have quite a diverse network, and that means I can adapt and create an experience for people in a way that many authors simply don't. So to give an example, I came up with the idea for the Connaught Hotel, for the bar inside the Connaught Hotel in London, to create a signature cocktail inspired by my book. So we created the Energize cocktail. But that was only because in my network, I had someone that was a bartender at that particular hotel. And then I have a friend that's in film production. And from having conversations with him, I was inspired to create a video trailer for my book in the same way that you have a trailer for a film before it's released. And then I have friends within the crypto and the fintech community, and they inspired me to launch one of the world's first book launches in the metaverse.
I saw that,
These are like ways that we can think and act differently, not just to stand out from the crowd, but also to adapt to the way that the world is moving in a different direction.
Yeah, how was the metaverse? That I saw you post that again on social media. I didn't take part in it, but how it looked so bizarre. I'll be honest, I haven't got my head around the whole metaverse yet. I'm not sure if I'm ready for it yet, but I'm sure it will happen before I know it. But how was it? Was it weird?
I gotta say it was incredible. I mean, given the fact that this technology is still early, I had my Oculus headset on.
Right.
I had the hand sort of joysticks, if you will, so it was mirroring my body language in the virtual world.
Okay.
It was incredible to walk up to people whose avatar was there, but they were physically in places like Dubai or Singapore or Australia, and just have a conversation with people all in this beautiful space. I think there was a lot of potential to be tapped here, and we're still very early, but it was just a very incredible experience for me, something I'm very grateful to have partnered with the people to make this happen.
So, sounds bizarre. Were you in an actual studio doing that? Was that something that you...
No, so I was just in my home. I was just in my living room. I put on this VR headset, and suddenly I'm transported into this sort of like digitally created space. And just speaking to the audience, I was introduced by someone who's from Australia. I then had somebody close who was in the north of England. And so we were all in this one space, yet we were so far apart physically. Gosh, blimey.
So something else that another bit in the book that really stood out to me, and I loved it, and I think you must have made this up, but I really like it, was the MBA. It was around curating your own MBA, which stands for Mental Board of Advisors. And that was further on in the book. So there may be people again on here who may not have got that far yet. And I'd love it if you could kind of, tell us more about that, how you came up with that idea. And obviously the 3 people you've chosen as well as your own are really interesting and so diverse. If you could give us some more background on that as well, would be great.
Yeah, sure. So the idea of the MBA, I mean, the MBA acronym I came up with myself, but the concept itself is nothing new. I mean, this sort of stuff has been shared for decades or maybe even centuries with all the books that have been out in the personal development world. But I call it MBA as a sort of a catchy way to remember the concept. And the reason I included it in the book is I would often get asked a question when I would go on stage and speak to audiences. I would get asked the question of, Simon, it's easy for you to say to hang around with people that are successful. You hang around people that are truly inspiring. How about if we're just at the beginning of our journey? And so this is what I wanted to speak to when I talk about the MBA, because that is also something that I had to lean into. When I first started, I was working in finance. I would spend my evenings drinking with people in finance, and I would spend my weekends hanging around with people in finance as well. And so I was very much living in a bubble. And so for me to start shifting my environment, it first started with books that I read, videos that I'd watched, podcasts that I'd listened to. And from there, I started to put together an MBA. And an MBA stands for Mental Board of Advisors. And it means that when you need to seek counsel, when you're going through a particular challenge or you have a big decision to make, what you do is you close your eyes, you go into your imagination, into your boardroom, you pull out your seat, you sit down, and sitting on your left and right are the people that you have chosen to sit as your board of advisors. Now, these individuals can be dead or alive, but the key is you've chosen them for a reason to help you with a problem, a challenge, or question that you want to share with them. Now, as you put it out to the middle of the room, you look at each of these individuals in turn, and you just notice what they say to you. Now, each of them will share with you something different. And the purpose of this exercise is simply to appreciate that there is always a different way to look at an event, a question, or an experience that you're currently going through. And that board can change. It depends on what you want to ask them. It depends on the decision you have to make. That board can change to suit you and what you want answered. And with regards to the 3 that I shared in the book, they are diverse and
very diverse.
I have them there for very different reasons. In terms of someone who is no longer with us, it is Bruce Lee. And for me, it's more because of his philosophy and the way that he was able to simplify some very important wisdom that we come to appreciate in life, such as I talked about being adaptable earlier. He calls that be like water. And I think his ability to communicate that in a way that we can all understand was profound. Then we got Sarah Blakely, the world's youngest self-made female billionaire. Now, if you're looking for somebody who demonstrates persistence and that can-do attitude, I think there is few people besides Sarah that you can look up to. And then Tim Ferriss, for me, is all about his ability to constantly experiment. He doesn't see failure as failure. He sees life as just one big experiment. And if you see it from that perspective, what happens is we turn the journey of life into a game. And I think when we see it as a game, it can make things more fun and exciting.
I have to say, so I've read a couple of Tim Ferriss's books, the 4-Hour Week and the 4-Hour Body, I think, and actually I did notice a few similarities in some of the stuff that you wrote about, but what I liked, so what I found with his, he's a really inspiring person, and I think, like you said, he challenges everything and the status quo. He kind of like, you don't have to do, like, we have this way of working, don't we, where we like turn on a laptop and like do your emails, and you talk about in the book about that as well, like you work out when your energy is at the highest and what are the activities that are high impact or lower impact, and kind of match it to your kind of energy levels. He looks at it, I think, slightly differently, doesn't he? He kind of breaks it up in such a way that you're working less and outsourcing loads. I think you touch on outsourcing as well, and it's fascinating. But I did really like how you've kind of in the book you've managed to distill that down to probably a bit more realistic. I think like I read his book and thought, oh, that's amazing, but I could never do that. Like, that's okay for you, Tim, because you're Tim Ferriss and you're kind of really out there. But actually, in reality, am I going to do that? Am I going to put an out of office on and say, I'm sorry, everybody, I'm not going to answer your email until these hours? I'm probably not, but I am going to take on board like what you were saying about working out when your energy levels are at their best, and working out what are those activities that are really important to achieve your purpose, and the ones that perhaps can happen at other times in the day when you know you're at that natural kind of lower state, and yeah, it's not quite as vital. So no, that was really interesting.
And I think with with what I try and get across in the book is that each of us are different. You know, in the same way that we have different energy levels throughout the day, different rhythms, what comes naturally to us will be different to our partner, our friend, or our colleague. And so with the book, it's to encourage you to understand, well, what are those strengths, those skills that come more naturally to you, and how can you lean into that? Because if those things give you energy, why not find ways that you can share that with others? So to give you a practical example, I enjoy speaking. You know, when someone says, Simon, can you go up onto the stage and speak for 20 minutes in front of 1,000 people? I'm comfortable with that. I will happily accept and go on a stage and talk. So if I enjoy speaking and that gives me energy, how can I lean into that and leverage that skill? Now, here's one way. So if you're listening in and you also enjoy speaking, here's a way that you can leverage that. So when somebody sends me a connection request on LinkedIn, if I accept, what I tend to do is I'll drop that person a short voice note, just to say, hello, I'm Simon, great to connect with you, and I look forward to learning more about your work. Now, what that does is, because I enjoy speaking, in that 7 or 8 seconds that people hear my voice, they get a experience of my energy. And that's because I enjoy speaking. So that would be something that comes naturally to me. Now, for others, there may be different things that come naturally to you. So it's about how can you lean into those strengths and those skills, because once you create opportunities where you can do more of what gives you energy, guess what? You create even more energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was one other thing that you touch on, and as a business, at Gilded Bee, we're really passionate about well-being, and I think you cover that at the beginning of the book about looking after your mental health, your physical health, and the things that you eat and consume, etc. But you also touch on almost financial well-being in the book as well, and this is a component of well-being which I think many forget about and don't see it as part of your well-being, and also as a blocker to your energy and achieving what you want to do. And again, could you just bring that to life a little bit more on like, you mentioned you know, if you don't have good management of your finances, then you're all consumed by the anxiety, and it can block you from actually achieving what you should be achieving.
Definitely. I mean, if you look at a lot of studies into mental health, what you will find that in many cases, what influences our mental health in a negative way is our financial position. But it also, at the same time, is one of those topics that not many of us like to talk about. You know, when people say, how much do you spend? How much do you earn? How much do you save? It can be quite a personal subject. Yet at the same time, it has a big influence on our energy. And I've noticed this not just in my own life growing up, but also with my clients. So one of my clients went through, unfortunately, a bit of divorce, but a lot of that came down to money. And money impacted them both in a very negative way, and as a result, drained them of energy. So for me, unless we have a healthy relationship with our finances, the way we see money, the way we use money, the way we invest money, then what happens is that you may have everything else in place, but if you haven't addressed that, what happens is that will always be hanging over you. And once you start to shift that relationship with money, and there's an interesting story, Emily, that I share in that chapter, which shows you how powerful that relationship can influence your thinking. So I was delivering a seminar to a room of entrepreneurs, and I simply said to the room, when you think of rich people, what comes to mind? And so what I did is, on this flip chart, I divided the flip chart into 2 columns. And I just started to write down all the adjectives and words that people were saying. And as they shouted them at me, I was putting them into these 2 different columns. So people would say something like selfish or greedy or golden spoon, all of these words. But I also say things such as lucky or inspiring or influential. So with all these words coming out, I would put them into two columns. Now, the reason I put them into two columns was that on the one side, we had positive words, and on the other column, we had negative words. And then the next question I asked the audience was, raise your hand if you want to be rich and wealthy. Now, of course, everybody's hand went up. And I said to them, now, notice the contradiction here. You want to be something. Some of you in this room want to be something in which you view people who are already that as negative. Notice how unhealthy that relationship is. You view rich people as lucky, selfish, greedy, yet you raise your hand on the question of, do you want to be rich? So until you can find peace with your understanding of money and the relationship you have with it, then it's going to be very difficult for you to get to that point in which you have a very negative association with it. That's an example of how our relationship and perspective about money can influence how we show up and how we use it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I completely agree. And that experiment, that was a moment again for me in the book. Ben's popped back up. So Ben, do we have any questions? I've just seen the time. I can't believe this is.
No, it's been rattling on. You've been doing such a great job.
I know.
I'm feeling guilty coming back actually, but there's loads of questions, some themed on the subject of energy levels. I think both Amy and Vicky have kind of sent questions in. As a mum of 3 kids, my personal energy levels are a constant battle. My question, is it possible to reverse or at least work with an energy slump to tackle to-do lists or other goals when your energy levels are low? And actually, Vicky, very similar. Do you ever have, Simon, do you ever have days where you're lacking in energy or motivation? If so, for a short period, do you have a go-to technique to move past that moment? I might add, this morning, honestly, my energy levels were 0, and I actually managed to get out of it. And I had no idea. I went for a cup of tea outside, I think was my kind of solution. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, anyway. Simon, tell us what to do.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to combine Amy and Vicky's question into one, because I think what I would say will kind of speak to both of that. So the first thing I would say is, yes, I do have days where I'm not always energized or full of motivation. We are human after all. You're not always going to wake up every morning pumped full of energy. Now, what that tells us is that we have to listen to our body. Our body might one morning say, you've got to take it slow today. You've had a few busy days. I reckon you should take it slow. The challenge is, are we listening to our body or are we ignoring it? So on those days when you don't feel particularly energized, maybe listen to what it needs. Maybe listen to what you need today. Because this idea of going full throttle every day, I don't think is healthy. The key is, yes, show up every day, but how you show up may be different. I'll give an example. If I'm particularly energized on a Monday morning, I might go and do a 90-minute workout in the gym, and I feel very motivated to do so. Now, if on a Wednesday morning I wake up and I'm like, well, I don't particularly feel energized today. Well, maybe I'll do a yoga session at home. Maybe I'll go for a short swim. So what I'm doing here is I'm adapting and adjusting. I'm still doing the same activity every day, but I'm adjusting how I do it. And so what we've also got to understand, and going to Amy's question about being a parent, I'm also a parent. I'm a father of a 2-year-old daughter. And so we've also got to be kinder to ourselves, because showing up as your best on a day in which maybe your children are at home because of lockdown, or showing up as your best on a day in which you've got to travel to another country, or showing up as your best as a single parent, it's going to be very different. It's going to look very different for each of us. And so we've got to be kinder to ourselves, but also realize, going to the question on the to-do list, is very often to make progress, it's not always about doing more, but more about doing less of the things that are holding us back. Because very often there are lots of things that we're doing that are just simply draining us of energy. If we start to strip away those things out of our life, we actually give oxygen and space to the thing that matter more. And so that's one of the things I would start with, is look at the things that are draining you of energy each day, and ask yourself, which of those things can I either 1, eliminate, or 2, do a lot less of, so that I have space for the things that actually do give me energy.
So can we just get rid of our children then? Is that
So Sanjay asked Simon and Emily, Simon, what lessons have you learned from since becoming a father? Is there an added question to that?
Yeah, Sanjay, well, thank you so much for the question. I've actually learned so many lessons from becoming a father. I mean, one of them is something Emily and I talked about earlier, which is being present. You know, I think children teach us how to live more in the present because they are themselves living in the present. They're not concerned about what happened or the future. They're literally just immersed in whatever they're doing in the moment. And I think that's something that is so important for us to be reminded of. And my daughter reminds me that of this idea of being present every single day. The other important lesson, which I think is critical for all of us to embrace in the path of personal development, is patience. When you raise a child, you understand that their brain hasn't fully developed to where yours is. And it takes them longer to learn certain things because their brain is still growing. And so we've got to be patient with their learning process, with how long it may take them to understand what we're saying or learn a new skill. And I think patience is something we as adults can also embrace. Often we can become impatient. We live in the society of instantaneous gratification. We want things now. And if we don't get it now, we get frustrated or we get angry. But actually embracing a bit of patience can help. Patience and consistency builds over time to land us where we would like to be.
Very true. Amy threw a comment into that point. Children also teach us how to adapt. It's a fair point. Do feel free, Emily, to throw in any of your questions.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw another question pop up from
Debbie, can negative energy ever be a good thing?
From David saying, actually, there's another question. I just saw David saying, what are the 3 books that Simon would recommend that most inspired him?
Yeah, well, I was going to come back to that, but let's do that. Yeah. Did you have an answer for that?
Yeah, so David, the 3 that come straight to my mind as soon as I saw that question, the first recommendation would be The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John David Mann, an incredible book, one that I reread every single year. The second would be, and it's not a particularly well-known book, but it's called The Teachings of Billionaire Yen Zhu, and it's split into 2 books, Volume 1 and Volume 2, by the author Colin Turner. And the reason I like that book is because it blends Eastern and Western philosophies, but it's also written in a unique way. So every chapter begins with a parable, and then the rest of the chapter is written in bullet points, so that when you open the book at any page, it literally becomes like a reference tool. So that would be the second recommendation. And the third that I would share with you is a book by Ryan Holiday called The Obstacle is the Way. So those will be my 3 book recommendations.
I'm typing them out whilst you're saying them.
No, David has read many a book, so I'd be interested to know. I don't know if you're still on, David, if you've read any of them, because David's he's recommended many to myself in the past. So really interesting title. I've not heard of any of them.
Perhaps we need David to comment on what his chosen books are as well.
Yeah.
Let's go to Dee Perry. Is that Debbie Perry?
That's Debbie, yeah.
Yeah, Debbie. Can negative energy ever be a good thing?
My personal experience, no. And for me, energy is interesting because it doesn't matter if energy is positive or negative. You simply become more of the sort of energy you spend time with. So if you spend time around negative energy, you can't help but be more negative. If you spend time with positive energy, you can't help but be more positive. And so that's why, for me, we have to be so careful about the energy sources that we have in our environment. And so when we curate our environment, not just the people we spend time with, but with what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, then we have to consciously choose what we feed our mind, what we allow in to our mind. Now, think of it this way. Imagine your mind is this boat in an ocean, and dry land is where you want to take your life. That holds your goals, your vision, and your dreams. Now, when the ocean is calm, you can continue to row that boat towards dry land. However, if that ocean is filled with toxicity and negativity, and you allow that water in, what happens is that boat starts to sink. You start to feel heavy and you can't move forward. And so in that way, negative energy will actually prevent you from making progress. And that is why more has always come from positivity than negativity. Now, this is not to say that there is nothing negative in the world. It's simply to understand that you get to choose what every event or experience that you go through means for you. And that in turn creates your reality. And that is why in the book, I introduced this word called paranoia. Now, paranoia is the belief that the world is out to get you. You didn't get that promotion because people are out to backstab you and to make sure you don't succeed. Paranoia is this belief that life is working for you and not against you. Now, when you start to view life through the lens of paranoia, when something doesn't always go your way, rather than viewing it in a negative way, you are seeking the lesson and the opportunity in every moment. Now, when you can live from that lens, from that space, magic begins to happen.
Absolutely. I always remember listening to Steve Jobs talk at one of the university, doing a university talk, and he talked about joining the dots, and that was something that really stood out for me. And I think that's a little bit like what you're talking about. So he talked about his life events, and they all seemed disconnected, and some of them were quite negative, like dropping out of university or whatever, all these other points. But ultimately, it was all about joining the dots to where he got to and why he became so amazing and managed to create such an incredible business off the back of it. And I think that's very much what you're describing there.
I just saw a comment from Dee Perry saying, I need to embrace paranoia. And that's a good thing I want to pick up on, actually. In the book, I talk about language, and this is a soft point here. But notice, Dee Perry, what happens if you change I need to embrace paranoia to I must embrace paranoia? Notice the energy shift in that word change. Because when we say I must to ourselves, it feels more definitive. It feels from a place of commitment. I must embrace paranoia. I must phone that person tomorrow. I must send that email out. What happens is there's a higher probability you're actually going to do that thing that you say.
I'm just David has just sent a few recommended book reads. I'm just sorting them on my wholesale and actually ordering the books now as we speak. So they'll be in our shop in on what are we today? Wednesday. They'll be in on Friday. So
I saw them pop up. What were they? They've gone off my screen. So
The Magic of Thinking Big. I did a Start with Why and How to Win Friends and Influence People. So
that book's a great one. I remember having to read that when I was an estate agent at 19 years old, and they gave that book to us, and it was all about being a much more sort of credible. They wanted us to be much more sort of credible sort of salespeople in the way that we worked with our clients. And yeah, it definitely it's an oldie, but definitely a good one.
I think David put all oldies and goldies. Oldies and goldies.
Well, it's interesting because David put Start with Why. And I've read all of Simon Sinek's books, and the one that is my favorite is The Infinite Game, which is his latest book. But yeah, Start with Why was the one that made Simon Sinek.
Absolutely.
So what's sort of next for you, Simon? Have you in your kind of plan of life and things? What's next?
So for me, it's more speaking. My business model has evolved over the years. So when I first started, it was around 80% of my time was coaching people one-on-one, and 20% was everything else. And now it's about 60-70% speaking, and the rest is one-to-one coaching, consulting, mentoring, and all the other stuff that comes with what I do. And hopefully, fingers crossed, a book too.
I was going to ask that, is there going to be a second book actually? Because I could definitely see a good follow-on. Yeah, no,
definitely. I really enjoyed the book process. I mean, it was both pleasurable and painful in equal measures, just because at the time of getting the book deal, I also became a parent for the first time around the same time that I signed the book deal.
Okay, yeah.
And with the backdrop of COVID and lockdown. And both sides of our family were living abroad at the time. And so with all of this coming together, and my wife and I both running businesses, it certainly made it more challenging than I anticipated.
I bet. So how did that conversation come about? Because you said that Penguin reached out to you right at the beginning. But how did it start? So
as I said, I mean, it wasn't something that I planned. But then towards the end of 2019, I was approached by a boutique publisher. And they said to me, Simon, we've been following your work and we would love to explore you writing a book with us. And I said, sure, let me know what you think and what you have in mind. And so they sent an offer across. But it wasn't an offer that was a win-win. It was more like a win-lose, and a lose for me because there was a lot of things going against me. And so I spoke to my wife about it, and she asked me a great question. And she said to me, Simon, assuming you were not to write any books apart from this one book, would you be happy with the publisher that has given you the offer? And of course, at the time, the answer was no. And that spurred me into reaching out to all of these other publishers. So I started to send emails and messages to Penguin, Simon & Schuster, Hay House, HarperCollins, all the big sort of names in the industry. And Penguin were one of the ones that got back to me a few weeks later. And so we met in person in the beginning of 2020. They liked what I was about. They liked my profile. And 5-6 months later, we had a deal in place.
Fantastic. And you touched on your wife there, which is also one of the points in the book that you talk about, which is about having that support, those relationships in place, and how important that was. And it does become really clear that your wife has certainly played a big part in your life, right back when you were having a low point, when you were in the finance industry, to now asking those sort of poignant questions to her to kind of get you thinking and being able to make those decisions.
Yeah, huge. I mean, you will know, and anybody who's already got a copy of the book, that I dedicated the book to her. And that is because we can often underestimate the impact and the influence that our life partner has on us. And for me, she has been there since I was in finance, to when I quit, to when I started my businesses, to when things didn't work out, to where I am today. And I don't think I would have made some of the decisions or be where I am today if it wasn't for having her in my life. And so when I talk about environment, I think we cannot talk about environment without also talking about who our partners are.
Yeah. What would your tip be for someone who doesn't have a partner?
For someone who doesn't have a partner, my tip would be, first, work on yourself. Because what happens is that we attract people into our life based on how we are, how we show up. So once you start working on yourself and you start embracing the values, the qualities and the characteristics that you want in your partner, you will start to find the person that also shares your similar values. That's what I found in not just my own life, but also in clients that I've worked with and also friends in my circles, is that once they started working on themselves, one, you show up differently. And because you show up differently, you attract a different sort of person.
Interesting.
That's wonderful. Listen, all good things unfortunately have to come to an end. We're now in the last minute of this event. So can I firstly, Emily, thank you so much for your time and assisting with setting this up. Simon, it's been an absolute honor to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ben, thank you so much. Emily, thank you so much for the incredible hosting, and look forward to connecting with you all soon again.
When are you going to visit Tring? That's what we want to know.
Well, I would love to go and visit Tring and check out your bookshop, Ben. So I will certainly take it offline. And if anybody did have other questions from today or about the book, feel free to reach out to me on social media. Fantastic. We're getting some lovely comments. Thank you from Amy. Excellent, engaging speaker from Debbie. Yeah, no, it's been an absolute wonderful event. So thank you so much. Guys, we'll see you for the next one, whenever that is. So hopefully 3 months' time, we'll have another business book club meeting. So and on that, just let us know any book titles that you'd like us to pick up on, and we'll reach out to them. So any ideas you have, let us know. It'd be great. Thank you. Fantastic. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye. Bye.